From the nation's capital, the Conservative Caucus presents Conservative Roundtable, an in-depth look at today's most important issues.
Welcome to Conservative Roundtable. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors these broadcasts now being shown all over America. We're pleased to have as our guest today Matthew Vadum. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Pretty close.
Close. Matthew is associated with the Capital Research Center, which is run by a dear friend of mine, Terry Scanlon. And Matthew occupies a very significant position at the Capital Research Center and is perhaps the world's or America's leading expert on one of the most nefarious characters on the world scene today. But before we get into the identity of that nefarious character, tell us a little bit about the Capital Research Center. What is its mission? When was it founded? I guess 25 years ago, nearly 24. And what are some of its great achievements?
Capital Research Center was founded about 25 years ago, in 1984. And it's a think tank, a watchdog group, and we study the politics of philanthropy. So we look at those who are funding nonprofit political advocacy groups, and we look at those advocacy groups, and we look at political movements and how they work the political system to accomplish their goals.
Well, the Conservative Caucus, since its founding in 1974, has made defunding the left a priority concern, and that relates to federal funding of left-wing activist organizations. We got involved in that because when I served in the federal government, running the U.S. Office of Economic Opportunity after Sergeant Shriver and Rumsfeld and all those folks, I was in a situation where our budget of several $1 billion funded not only 2,000 so-called civil servants on the headquarters and regional staffs, but we funded 10,000 nonprofit organizations which employed some 500,000 people at taxpayer expense. And they promoted every left-wing cause, from welfare rights to homosexual activism to abortion to voting rights for illegal aliens, etc. To what degree does CRC pay attention to the federal funding of activist groups?
We do try to focus on where nonprofit, generally left-wing political advocacy groups are getting their money, and many of them, like La Raza and ACORN and various other activist groups, do receive money from the federal government, whether directly or indirectly. So we try to keep tabs on those federal monies.
Your publications are excellent. How many people benefit from receiving them?
Well, the actual print subscription figure is in the thousands. It's not that high, but we get a lot more hits on our website because you can read all of our newsletters free of charge on the website.
What is the website?
It's www.capitalresearch.org.
How did you, now you used to be a financial journalist.
That's right.
How did you get involved with George Soros, the villain of whom we speak? Was it because of the money he made exchanging currencies, or what?
Well, no, we didn't. When I was at the Bond Buyer, which was the daily newspaper of tax-exempt municipal bonds. It's still around today, a Wall Street daily. But we didn't really deal with George Soros. George Soros was more of interest to me once I joined the think tank world, because George Soros is the leading funder of left-wing causes in America. He's the preeminent. If something big is happening, chances are he is behind it.
Is he an American?
He's an American now.
What is his country of origin?
Well, he's originally from Hungary.
And how long ago did he become an American citizen?
I think it was decades ago. It's been a long time. He escaped from the Nazis and avoided the Holocaust. He was born Georgi Schwartz, but then he changed his name to something more Hungarian sounding, so as not to run afoul of the Third Reich, which I guess is understandable.
Sort of like Ralph Lauren, whose name is Ralph Lipschitz.
I guess so.
Yeah. Well, how did Soros make his money?
Well, he's a currency speculator. So basically, he, for lack of a better term, corners the market in currencies and does his best to break the bank. And he did that to the Bank of England, and I supposedly made $1 billion overnight because he bet the right way. and shorted the currency. And so he's a hedge fund manager by profession, and he's very good at knowing which direction the market is going.
Explain to our viewers what a hedge fund is.
Hedge fund is money that people invest in order to, I guess, to protect their in order to protect their investments. It's like it's not exactly a mutual fund. It's really hard to describe, I guess.
They sell short.
Well, they sell short, and they.
What does short selling mean?
Short selling is when you bet that when you bet, in effect, you borrow securities from somebody on the understanding and in the expectation that the price is going to drop, and you make a profit from that.
Well, it's very complicated.
It's very complicated, and aspects of it were banned by the SEC after the subprime mortgage collapse, after the stock market started falling precipitously in September.
In what ways did Soros initially immerse himself in American political issues?
Well, he's been involved for a long time, and initially he just got involved with funding Democratic candidates. And he was
under the federal election laws, there are limits on how much you can spend. How does he circumvent those limits?
Well, he uses all sorts of legal loopholes, and it takes advantage. I don't think he violates any laws, but he has smart lawyers working for him, and he's given tens of millions of dollars to 527s.
What is a 527?
A 527 is a political advocacy group that runs. They tend to be issue-oriented, and they run ads encouraging the defeat or election of a specific candidate. But they can't actually say that. They can come pretty close.
You can't say vote to elect or vote to defeat.
They can say John Smith has a terrible record and has done terrible things, and you should really think hard about
contact him to let him know how you feel.
That's right. They can't actually say vote for or vote against, but they can almost say it. They can come very close without crossing the line. He funded like $24 million in anti-Bush 527s in 2004.
What role did he play in the 2008 congressional and presidential elections?
Well, he played a big role through the organization that he co-founded called the Democracy Alliance, which it's a collection of basically liberal billionaires and millionaires. So you might as well rename it the Plutocracy Alliance. But their goal is not just to elect Democrats in one election. Their goal is to create a viable leftist infrastructure. They want to create a new network of think tanks and media outlets and activist groups and leadership schools and training facilities.
So they're copying what conservatives have been doing since conservatives began copying liberals in the early 70s.
That's right, exactly. And in fact, they credit the conservative, they're quite open about it. Rob Stein, who was the mastermind behind it, he was a former, he was an official in the Clinton administration. And he studied the conservative movement, and he put together a slideshow and took it on the road, showed it to a lot of influential liberal donors and people influential in the Democratic Party, and convinced them that they needed to do what the conservative movement had done in the 70s and the 80s.
What left organization is most analogous to or comparable to, for example, the Heritage Foundation?
Well, that would have to be the Center for American Progress, which is headed by John Podesta, who is currently President-elect Barack Obama's transition co-chair, one of the co-chairs. And he is the president of the Center for American Progress, and he said that he wants it to be not just a think tank, he wants it to be a think tank on steroids. We had a human events reporter, John Gizzi, wrote an excellent profile last year of the Center for American Progress that is up on our website right now.
Now, there's no limit to the amount of money that Soros can give the Center for American Progress.
Not to the best of my knowledge. You could give an unlimited amount to.
Of course, there's a limit on the degree to which it might be tax deductible. Is it a C3?
It is broken down into different divisions. I think there's a 501c3, and I believe they also have a 501c4. So a lot of these larger organizations break themselves up into branches in order not to run afoul of the IRS.
Well, we only have 30 seconds before the break. When we come back, I'd like you to share with the audience the names, the identities of some of the other organizations that have been spawned as a result of Mr. Soros' activities.
Certainly.
We'll be right back. Stay with us. And our guest is Matthew Vadum, or Vadum, who is with the Center, the Capital Research Institute. Stay with us.
My name is Walter Jones. I represent the 3rd Congressional District in North Carolina, the home of Camp Lejeune Marine Base. And I'm pleased to be here today to encourage the American people to remember that their voices need to be heard by those of us in Washington, D.C., both the House side and the Senate side, that there are too many issues facing this country. There'll be a new president in 2009, and we need to let our voices be heard. From immigration issues to terrorism to the fact that this country's debt, we owe China over $900 billion. But I want those people that might be seeing this interview to know that we, the American people, with the help of God, we can change the direction of this nation. Just like the American people did on the issue of amnesty when it was before the Senate. They made telephone calls, they sent faxes, emails, and they wrote letters, and they said to the Senate, do not pass this amnesty bill, and it was killed.
Hi, I'm United States Representative Thaddeus McCotter from Michigan's 11th Congressional District. As we enter a new millennium of hope and peril, with so many problems besetting our country and yet so many opportunities before us, it is oftentimes tempting to think that your voice doesn't matter. What can one person do to make a difference in the life of their community and their country? Well, the first thing you can do is to contact your legislator. You are one of the sovereign citizens of the United States. You elect your servants to work for you in Congress. Let them know what you think. Send them a letter, send them an email, call them on the phone. Your voice matters, because if you don't raise your voice in the interests of our free republic, who will?
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, Chairman of the Conservative Caucus. Our guest is Matthew Vadum of the Capital Research Center. We're talking about George Soros. Tell us more about what we ought know about Mr. Soros.
Well, as I was saying in the first segment, he's part of the Democracy Alliance and is the prime mover behind it, and it funds a plethora of left-wing organizations that aren't just focused on the next election. They're focused on building a long-term, sustainable left-wing, progressive movement in America.
He had a lot to do with the Obama campaign. Was he for Obama from the beginning, or was he ever for Clinton?
I don't know if he was for Clinton in the beginning, but he came out for Obama pretty early. Long before Obama started winning in the primaries, before the primary voting started.
Can you estimate how much money came to Obama's benefit from the hundreds of millions that he raised as a result of George Soros' effort?
No, I can't. It's difficult to say.
Now, is he involved in with David Axelrod and others in terms of enhancing left and liberal influence with internet technology and other means by which people are mobilized and funds are raised?
Well, I know that he's very involved with John Podesta of the Center for American Progress, which has been very successful in getting the liberal message out and has been called a government in waiting. It was just waiting for the next Democratic White House to come in, basically.
What was his relationship, if any, with Bill Clinton?
Soros and the Clintons, I think they get along fairly well.
Did he play any kind of role during the Clinton presidency?
I don't think that he was quite as involved in those years. George Soros really became a very, very involved political activist in the age of George W. Bush.
Was there a particular reason, or was it just a maturation of his power and his resources?
Well, what's basically happened with Soros is that after September 11th, the war on terror is what it made him really flip his lid. And
why?
Because he thinks the war on terror is a false metaphor, that you can't attack terror, a phenomenon, and that it sets people on edge and it justifies all sorts of crackdowns.
Is he a civil libertarian?
I guess you could say he's a civil libertarian, but at the same time he doesn't think that, he doesn't seem to think that America has legitimate war goals in the war on terror. He doesn't think it's a legitimate war.
Well, I don't either.
Well, that's right. He doesn't support. He basically doesn't support anything that George Bush did. He didn't support tax cuts. He doesn't support any cutbacks in government spending. He's in favor of basically anything that's radical and bad. He's in favor of anything conservatives don't like.
Now, what is his relationship with ACORN?
Well, through the Democracy Alliance, which he has great influence over. The Democracy Alliance has sent millions of dollars to ACORN, and ACORN has used those funds to help to increase its influence, in terms of fraudulent voter registrations and in pushing its policy initiatives like the Living Wage Initiative. And they claim to have been successful in getting it through at the state level in Florida.
Now, Barack Obama was an attorney for ACORN at one point.
He was an attorney for ACORN in the Edgar versus Illinois voting rights case. And he also organized for ACORN's, a division of ACORN, a subsidiary called Project Vote. And he ran a very successful voter drive for them back in 92 or 93.
To what degree, now, Saul Alinsky died before Obama had a chance to meet him, but Alinsky had a big impact on both Hillary Rodham and Barack Obama.
That's right.
And what impact did he have on ACORN?
Well,
was there a direct link of his playing a part in organizing ACORN?
I don't think not that I'm aware, there might have been, but not that I'm aware of. I know that he influenced the thinking of Wade Rathke, the founder of ACORN, who originally was a draft resistance order for the radical organizer for the radical group Students for Democratic Society, and he was also involved in the National Welfare Rights Organization.
George Wiley's organization. That's
right, and they put together that that Cloward-Piven strategy, what political scientists say.
Francis Fox Piven.
That's right, that you want to overwhelm the welfare rolls in order to bankrupt the state and overthrow the capitalist system.
Yeah, they were implementing the strategy of a famous Italian communist who, while in prison, said that the left, in order to succeed, would not take America through economic determinism, but through a long march, by means of a long march through the institutions.
Is that Antonio Gramsci?
Antonio Gramsci. And unfortunately, under Republican presidents, as well as under Lyndon Johnson, there were 500 chapters of the National Welfare Rights Organization created around the country. Again, that was something that I put a stop to when I was there, but everything that I closed was put back because Nixon, who was supposed to veto further funding, instead signed it, and in fact, doubled the funding for these Great Society programs that had been initiated under Lyndon Johnson. A tremendous disappointment to me because I had been a big Nixon fan.
Right. Well, as you know, ACORN copied a lot of the tactics of the National Welfare Rights Organization, storming offices, having sit-ins, and causing a ruckus. ACORN and La Raza and the Green Lining Institute like to have sit-ins at banks, and then they won't leave until the banks agree to start lending money to people who can't afford to pay
Community
loans
Reinvestment
back.
Act.
That's right, the Community Reinvestment Act, which is largely responsible, not in 100%, but it played a big role in the financial meltdown that America is going through right now.
Well, while we're talking about that, what are, in addition to the Community Reinvestment Act, in your opinion, as a financial journalist and keen observer, what do you think are the various causes of our financial meltdown?
Well, the country's been living beyond its means for a long time, and people just haven't been able to stop spending, and they've been spending other people's money that doesn't, they've been living beyond their means, and that's a big problem. And when you combine that with the massive housing bubble that was developing over the last few years.
What part has the Fed played in this problem?
Well, the Fed, I would say the Fed, I'm no economist, but I don't think you have to be an economist to recognize that they made money too easy for too long. Like, for example, after September 11th, dropping it to, what was it, by hundreds of basis points over a matter of...
Low interest.
That's right, to 1%. They changed the Fed, the Fed overnight funds rate to 1%.
And a lot of...
and that fed the bubble.
Fiat money.
That's right. They basically they debase the currency. It's like invisible inflation that nobody sees. You just notice that over a period of time, your dollar doesn't buy as much as it used to.
What led you to become a financial journalist?
Just an interest in business. I didn't want to be a reporter writing about fire departments rescuing cats from trees.
Is this what you studied in college?
No, not at all. Not at all. Studied American studies.
Really? Where'd you go to school, if I may ask?
Oh, most recently Georgetown.
And American studies?
American studies. Yeah.
And
Go Hoyas.
And so you became a financial journalist in what year?
In 1999.
So you've seen a fair amount. Do you have any...
I sat through many boring Barney Frank hearings.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about how the country can best dig itself out of the problem? We've...
Stop spending so much money.
We gave Henry Paulson a blank check. $700 billion may be just a starting point.
That was a mistake.
AIG's been bailed out. Now they're going to bail out the big three automakers. And you've even got some very conservative Republicans endorsing that. When the real problem is things like requiring high mileage returns. A big problem
is cafe standards.
The cafe standards. Yeah. A big problem is the health insurance burden, the special privileges for the United Auto Workers, et cetera.
Right.
What thoughts do you have on what can be done without doing further harm to the economy?
I think that the automakers, if they need to reorganize, they should file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, which would give them which would basically give them a break from paying their bills until they can restructure themselves. We're
going to take another break, and we'll be back with some final comments from Matthew Vadum after these messages. Please stay with us. There are many conservative organizations, but the Conservative Caucus is unique in that our standard for evaluating public policy is the Constitution of the United States. Our goal is to advocate policies which conform to what the Constitution stipulates and to oppose those which undermine the Constitution. It's clear that the federal government has only those powers which are provided in the Constitution, which were initially delegated by the states to the federal government or which were subsequently added by amendment. If we adhered to that principle, your taxes would be lower and your liberties would be more secure.
The Conservative Caucus, www.conservativeusa.org or 703-938-9626.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors Conservative Roundtable. If you're interested in the kinds of issues we discuss on Conservative Roundtable, I hope you'll check out the website of the Conservative Caucus, www.conservativeusa.org. You might want to fax us your name and address. Our fax number is 703-281-4108. Without cost or obligation, we'll send you sample publications. We'd like to get you involved in our work. And Matthew, how do people contact you and the Capital Research Center?
You can just go to our website, www.capitalresearch.org.
One of the things that George Soros has been involved in is the Secretary of State project, not the federal State Department, but the Departments of State in each of the 50 states. Tell us about it.
The group that Soros is so involved in that we've been talking about, Democracy Alliance, is a big funder. It's directed money to the Secretary of State project, which aims to put liberal Democrats in control of every Secretary of State position. I think that only 2 states don't have a Secretary of State position.
Or they call them something else.
Or that, you're right, the Chief Elections Officer is called something else. That's right. So they want to get as many of those people in as possible, and they've succeeded. They've put in 8 or 9 so far, and one of them is Mark Ritchie, who is the Democrat overseeing the recount right now between the Coleman and Franken camps.
He may
for the
decide
US Senate.
whether Mr. Franken becomes a U.S. Senator.
It may be his call, that's right, and he's an ally of ACORN. So, you know, when somebody's an ally of a vote fraud conglomerate, you definitely have to keep an eye on them. You know, it was Joseph Stalin who wisely observed years ago that it doesn't matter who casts the votes, it's who counts the votes that matters. And they take that to heart at the Secretary of State project. They say they're about election protection, but they're about you know, not enforcing voter ID laws and not pressing for them.
Isn't it interesting that they challenge laws which would require people to identify themselves with a driver's license or whatever at the polls?
Absolutely. You want to get a library book, you've got to show ID. You want to vote, you don't have to show anything.
Matthew, we've got to end it here. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for spending this time with us and sharing your knowledge with us. Thanks for watching Conservative Roundtable.